The day I found out everything was falling apart, I had just finished my cup of coffee. Nothing fancy, just black, like I always preferred it. I sat there, in my favorite chair by the window, watching the rain tap against the glass. The world outside felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. You know, when you're older, you learn to expect the quiet. The kind of stillness that comes after a lifetime of hustle, the silence after all the noise has faded away. But silence isn't always peaceful, is it? Sometimes, it's just the calm before the storm. It all started when Thomas, my youngest son, came over for dinner. He looked at me with those eyes of his, eyes that used to light up when he was just a boy, running through the house with that mischievous grin. But now, there was something distant in his gaze, something guarded. "Mom," he said, his voice unusually flat, "I need to talk to you." I could feel my heart tighten at the way he said it. I knew something was off, but I didn't expect the truth that would follow. You never really expect it, do you? Truth has a way of sneaking up on you, even when you think you're prepared. He took a deep breath and told me everything, about Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, and the money. The house. The assets that I thought were safe in my name, the ones I'd worked so hard for, all of it, gone. "Mom, Rebecca and we've been talking to a lawyer," Thomas continued, his voice a little softer now. "She's looking into the divorce. She wants half of everything." I felt the air leave my lungs. For a moment, everything went still. I wasn't angry, not yet, but a part of me knew something had shifted irreparably. Rebecca, the woman I had trusted like a daughter, was plotting behind my back with my son. I could almost hear the echo of the betrayal, ringing in the silence between us. I stood up slowly, the weight of his words sinking into my bones. "Thomas," I said, my voice steady but cold, "do you really think you can just take everything I've worked for?" His eyes flickered, and I could see the guilt in them. I'd raised him better than this, but somewhere along the way, I had failed. Maybe it wasn't just him. Maybe it was me. But I couldn't afford to think like that. Not anymore. Later that evening, I found myself sitting alone, the quiet of the house wrapping itself around me like a shroud. I thought about the years I'd spent building this life, first with Richard, then after he was gone, alone, with the children. I thought about the sacrifices I made, the hours spent working to keep everything running smoothly. And now, here I was, betrayed by the very people I had spent my whole life caring for. I stood up from my chair, my feet carrying me instinctively to the family photo on the mantel. It was an old picture, one from when the children were young, before all the complications. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, not then. The smile on my face in that picture felt like a lie. I was holding on to a version of the world that didn't exist anymore. I used to think I was strong, I thought, but strength is just another word for pride. And pride can blind you to the truth. I moved back to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I cleaned up the remnants of dinner. The smell of garlic and rosemary still lingered in the air, but even that familiar scent couldn't bring me comfort. Every sound seemed louder now, more pronounced. The scraping of the fork against the plate, the hum of the refrigerator, everything felt like it was part of a world that no longer made sense. I thought about the conversation with Thomas. He didn't want this, not really. But he was weak. And weakness is what makes betrayal so easy. It's not always malice. Sometimes, it's just the result of not having the courage to do the right thing. The next day, the rain stopped, but the chill stayed. I tried to go about my day, but everything felt off. When you've lived as long as I have, you learn to recognize when something isn't right. It's like a sixth sense, a feeling in your bones that tells you something is about to change. But you don't know how, or when, or if you can stop it. I didn't want to call Rebecca. Not yet. I needed time to process everything, to make sense of what Thomas had said. But when she showed up at the door later that afternoon, I could feel the weight of what was coming. She was as poised as always, her smile cold and calculated. "Mom," she greeted me, her tone a little too sweet. "I think we need to talk." At that moment, as I stood there looking at Rebecca, I realized something. She wasn't just here to discuss a divorce. She was here for something far worse. I knew this would change everything, but I wasn't prepared for how far this would go. The conversation with Rebecca didn't go as I expected. I had thought in my mind that I would be the one to speak first, to confront her with the truth, to demand answers. But no, she had her own plan. She always did. "Mom," she said, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table, "I think we both know things can't stay the way they are. You've been alone for so long, and Michael and we just can't keep up with everything anymore." I raised my eyebrows. Was that supposed to be an apology? Her voice dripped with an edge of fake sympathy, like she was doing me some kind of favor. "You think I don't know what you're trying to do?" I asked, my voice steady, but the sting of her betrayal lacing my words. "You and Thomas, sneaking behind my back, plotting to take my house, my life, my legacy." Rebecca's eyes widened for just a second, but then she covered it with a tight smile. "I'm only trying to help you, Mom. You need to face reality. You're not getting any younger. Things are changing, and we need to think about what's best for all of us." What's best for all of us? I repeated that line in my head, over and over, trying to understand it. Best for who? Her. Michael. Me. I could feel the anger rising in my chest, but I pushed it down. I had lived through far worse than this. I knew what it felt like to be wronged, to have everything you cared about taken from you. And I wasn't going to let Rebecca take anything else from me. Not again. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, staring at her. She had no idea what she was dealing with. She thought I was just some frail old woman who couldn't see through her games. But she didn't know about my past. She didn't know who I used to be. Years ago, when Richard was still alive, I had a different life. I wasn't just a mother or a wife. I was someone who could fight back. I had built my career from scratch, and no one could take that away from me. Not even Richard. I remembered the days when I was a lawyer, walking into courtrooms with my head held high. My reputation had been built on my ability to outsmart even the most seasoned attorneys. I had made a name for myself in Chicago, known for my sharp mind and unwavering commitment to justice. But life has a funny way of making you forget who you are. After Richard left, and the children grew up and moved away, I settled into this quiet, peaceful life. I thought I'd found a sense of peace, that maybe I had done my part. But now, sitting here across from Rebecca, I realized I had been wrong. Peace didn't come without a fight. I couldn't believe I had let it all slip away. But there was no time to dwell on the past. I had to act. I couldn't let Rebecca, or anyone, take my legacy from me. Not after everything I'd sacrificed. "Rebecca," I said, my voice soft but firm, "you may have underestimated me. But you've crossed a line, and I'm not going to let you destroy what I've spent my life building." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt. Maybe she had thought she could manipulate me, take advantage of my age, my quiet demeanor. But I wasn't a fool. "I've been in this game longer than you think," I continued. "And you're going to regret trying to take what's mine." Her mouth tightened, but she didn't respond. She knew, just like I did, that this wasn't a battle she could win. Not unless she played dirty. And that's exactly what she was about to do. That night, as I sat in the living room alone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of something. Something big. The betrayal from Rebecca had cracked open a door I thought I had closed forever. And behind that door, I found memories of a time when I was strong, when I had the power to change things. I thought about how I had come to this point. How I had let myself become complacent, thinking that my family was my safe place. But now, it was all falling apart. My own flesh and blood were turning on me. And then it hit me. I needed to go back. I needed to fight the way I used to fight. The way I had fought for my family when everything else had seemed impossible. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit back and let them take everything from me. I had spent too many years building my life to let it all fall apart now. I had to fight. So, I called up an old friend. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Robert Medina, a private investigator. Robert had been my ally during some of my hardest cases, back when I still practiced law. He knew the ins and outs of the legal world better than anyone. If anyone could help me dig up the dirt on Rebecca, it was Robert. I dialed the number, my fingers trembling slightly as I heard the phone ring. When Robert answered, his voice was low, familiar. "Clara," he said, "long time. What can I do for you?" "I need your help," I replied, my voice steady. "I've got a situation that needs some attention." Robert didn't ask questions. He never did. He simply agreed to meet me the next day, and that was all I needed. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. I was no longer just the mother sitting in the corner, waiting for things to happen. I was back in the game, and I wasn't going to let anyone take what was rightfully mine. Not without a fight. I had no idea how far this was going to go, or what it would cost me. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Rebecca, or anyone else, get away with this. The truth was about to come to light, and it wasn't going to be pretty. The meeting with Robert wasn't like any I'd had before. His office was tucked away in a narrow alley off one of Chicago's quieter streets, an old building that had seen better days, much like me. But that didn't bother me. Robert had always preferred the shadows, and I respected that. When I walked in, the smell of tobacco mixed with old paper hit me immediately. Robert sat behind his desk, a half-finished cup of coffee beside him, his worn face lit by a desk lamp that barely gave off any warmth. He looked up as I entered, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of my past come rushing back. Before the house, before the children, before all of it. Back when I was someone. "Clara," he greeted me, his voice low, almost amused. "You never call unless it's important. What's going on?" I didn't waste any time. "I need you to find something for me. Something that'll give me leverage against Rebecca and Thomas." Robert leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. He knew this wasn't a small ask. He knew I wouldn't come to him unless it was big. "Leverage her," he said, his tone sharp now. "What's the game this time, Clara?" I told Robert everything. About Rebecca, the divorce, the betrayal. How Thomas was involved and how it was all linked to the house, the one thing I thought I could always count on. But as I spoke, a part of me felt like I was unraveling a piece of my soul, exposing too much. "You've been living in silence for too long, Clara," Robert said after I finished. "You've got a fire in you still, I can see that. But you need to remember, the truth has a price. Sometimes, the cost is higher than you expect." I nodded, understanding fully what he meant. The truth could destroy families, tear apart everything that held us together. But what choice did I have? If I didn't do this, if I didn't fight for what was mine, then what was the point of all the years I had spent trying to build something good? "I'm ready, Robert. Just tell me what you need." The next day, Robert worked quickly. By the time I met him at a small cafe on the edge of town, he had already gathered the evidence I needed. Records, photographs, documents that would tear Rebecca's carefully constructed lies apart. "Here's what you need," he said, sliding a folder across the table to me. The photos inside were clear. Rebecca, with a man I didn't recognize, coming out of a hotel on the Gold Coast. The man was tall, dressed in a designer suit, his arm around her waist in a way that wasn't just friendly. I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't just an affair. This was something much bigger. "This is William Harris," Robert explained, "a real estate mogul with a history of manipulating women into signing over assets. He's the one behind Rebecca's scheme." I felt the weight of the truth sink in. All these years, I had been blind, thinking I was just dealing with a selfish daughter-in-law. But now I realized I was up against something far darker. I took a deep breath, the folder in my hands shaking slightly. But I wasn't afraid. If anything, I felt the old fire in me burning brighter than ever. This wasn't just a fight for money, it was a fight for my dignity, for my family, and for everything I had worked for. The truth was no longer something I could avoid. It was right in front of me, staring back in black and white. I knew now that there was no going back. I wasn't going to let Rebecca destroy my family. The next step was clear: confront her with the truth. But would she back down? Or would she keep fighting to take everything from us? The days that followed were filled with a strange mix of tension and anticipation. Every time I walked into the house, I could feel the weight of what was coming. I wasn't just preparing to confront Rebecca. I was preparing to face a part of myself I hadn't thought about in years. I couldn't help but remember what it was like when Richard was still alive. The way we used to fight together, how we would share everything, the good and the bad. But after his death, I'd built this life alone. Maybe I was so focused on holding things together that I didn't see the cracks forming around me. One evening after Michael had gone to bed, I sat in the living room, the house eerily quiet. I thought about all the times I had protected my family, when Thomas was just a boy, when we were poor and struggling, and how, even then, I had never given up. But now, the stakes were higher. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my home. I stood up, walking toward the mantel where the family photos still sat, gathering dust. This was my family, my legacy, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. The truth was out there, and I was going to use it to fight back. But in doing so, I couldn't help but wonder, was I prepared for the fallout? Was I ready to lose everything to win back what was mine? The confrontation with Rebecca happened sooner than I expected. She came to the house one morning, wearing that smile she always put on when she was about to manipulate someone. But today, it wasn't going to work. "You're going to regret this," she said as she stepped through the door. "Michael and we've been through enough. You can't keep holding on to everything." I didn't wait for her to finish. I walked toward the dining room table and laid the folder down in front of her. Her eyes widened as she saw the photos, the evidence of her betrayal staring back at her. Rebecca's facade cracked for just a moment, and in that moment, I knew I had her. The game was over. She had underestimated me. Again. I was no longer the weak old woman she thought I was. Rebecca's expression changed from shock to anger in a split second. "You think this changes anything?" she spat. "You think you've won?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The truth had already spoken for me. The silence between us was suffocating. Rebecca's eyes darted from the folder to me, her lips trembling with rage. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered everything she had done. The lies, the manipulation, the way she had worked behind my back to destroy everything Michael and I had fought for. "You think these photos mean anything?" she snapped, her voice sharp and bitter. "I can spin this story however I want. No one will believe you. You've been out of the game for too long, Clara." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to make them believe me," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm making them believe the truth. And the truth always comes out." Her face twisted with contempt as she glanced down at the photos again. I could see her mind working, calculating her next move. But there was nothing left for her to do. The damage had already been done. The truth was in the open, and there was no way for her to wiggle out of it. "I won't let you take this house, Rebecca," I continued, my words cold, unwavering. "It was never yours to take in the first place. Michael worked for this. We built this together." She sneered at me, her eyes narrowing in defiance. "You really think Michael cares about this house? It's just a piece of property. He'll sign it over when he realizes how much easier his life will be without you interfering." The bitterness in her voice made my stomach turn. She was right about one thing. Michael was broken. But he wasn't a fool. He knew the truth. I knew he did. He had always known. I didn't need to explain anymore. I had already taken the first step. The evidence was out there. And now it was time to let the world see the real Rebecca, the woman who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted, no matter the cost. But there was one more thing I had to do before this was over. I had to confront my son. Michael had been silent since I first confronted Rebecca. He had sat quietly in the living room, watching the exchange unfold with a look on his face that I couldn't quite place. It was a mix of sadness, confusion, and something else, regret. I walked into the room where he was sitting, his crutches leaning against the wall. His tired eyes met mine, and I saw the weight of his years, his struggle, pressing down on him. "Michael," I said softly, sitting down beside him. "You know the truth, don't you?" He nodded slowly, but there was hesitation in his eyes. "I know," he whispered. "I've always known. But I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to believe it." I reached out and placed my hand over his, squeezing it gently. "It's not your fault. None of this is." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the spark of hope flicker in his eyes. It was fragile, but it was there. "You've always been my strength," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." I felt a lump form in my throat as I squeezed his hand tighter. "You don't need to worry about that anymore. You're not alone. We're in this together." The moment between us was more than just a mother and son comforting each other. It was the first real conversation we'd had in months, maybe years. And in that quiet exchange, I realized something. It wasn't just about the house, or the divorce. It was about the love we had for each other, and how we would rebuild from the wreckage. Together. The next few days were a blur of legal papers, phone calls, and tense conversations. Robert had been invaluable, helping me track down more evidence to strengthen my case. But even with all the facts, the hardest part was still to come, facing Rebecca in court. I stood at the courthouse doors, the familiar smell of old wood and polished floors filling the air. My heart was pounding in my chest, but this time, it wasn't fear that gripped me. It was resolve. I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. Rebecca was already seated at the defendant's table when I entered the courtroom. Her sharp red dress, so carefully chosen to project power, couldn't hide the nervousness in her eyes. She was losing control, and she knew it. I took my seat beside Michael, feeling the tension in the room tighten with every second that passed. The judge, an older man with a stern expression, called the court to order, and for a moment, everything felt surreal. But I was ready. More than ready. The moment the judge called for the first piece of evidence, I knew it was time. Time to put an end to this charade and expose Rebecca for what she really was. No more games. No more pretending. The trial unfolded as expected. Rebecca's lawyer, Jennifer Rivers, tried to poke holes in our case, but it was clear that their arguments were weak. The photos, the records, the bank transactions, everything we had gathered spoke for itself. And then, it was my turn to speak. I stood up, my legs steady beneath me, and I walked to the front of the room. As I laid the first piece of evidence before the judge, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment where I would finally take back what was mine. "Your Honor," I began, my voice strong and clear, "I present to you the truth. The truth that my son's life, and our family's future, has been manipulated and destroyed by the very person who swore to stand by him. Rebecca Torres, my daughter-in-law, has been working behind our backs to destroy our family. And today that ends." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Every eye was on me. Rebecca's face was pale now, and Jennifer's once confident demeanor had slipped into uncertainty. This wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming everything they had tried to take from us. As I spoke, I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something deeper. It was the realization that I had fought for this moment my whole life. And no one, was going to take it away from me. The truth had spoken. And now, there was no turning back. The courtroom was still, too still, as the judge deliberated. His gavel lay before him, untouched, and I could hear the faint ticking of the clock behind him, each second drawing out the tension in the room like a drawn bowstring. I could feel the eyes on me. All the years of quiet, of retreating into the background, now felt like a lifetime ago. This was my moment, not for me, but for Michael, for everything we had worked for, and for the love that had been buried under the rubble of betrayal. As the judge returned to his seat, I took a deep breath. The anticipation was suffocating, but I knew that whatever happened next, I had done everything I could. I had fought with every ounce of strength I had left, and now it was up to the law, the truth and fate to decide. Mrs. Villiser, the judge began, his voice gravely serious. We've reviewed all the evidence, and the court has reached a decision. I could see Rebecca's hands trembling in her lap, her usual composure slipping, and for the first time, I felt a surge of satisfaction. She had miscalculated. She thought she could outsmart us, outmaneuver me, but she didn't understand the depth of what she was up against. The divorce between Michael Villasenor and Rebecca Torres is granted, the judge continued, and the custody of Sarah Villasenor will remain with her father, Michael, and her grandmother, Clara Villiser. As for the property dispute, the house in question, located on the outskirts of Chicago, will remain the sole property of Mr. Villasenor. Mrs. Torres will receive no financial compensation from this estate. There it was. The moment I had been fighting for. The gavel struck, sharp and final. It was over. As I sat there, I could see Rebecca's face contorting in disbelief. This wasn't the ending she had planned, and the realization that she had lost everything was written all over her. I wasn't sure if I felt relief, anger, or something else entirely. But I knew that this victory wasn't mine alone. It was Michael's, and it was Sarah's, too. Michael looked at me then, his eyes brimming with tears. But these weren't tears of defeat. No, these were tears of something I hadn't seen in him in years. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, everything we had lost could be rebuilt. Hope that his family was intact, and that the betrayal would not be the last word in our story. I stood up, my heart swelling with a fierce maternal pride. I could feel the weight of every decision, every sacrifice, and every tear I had shed for him over the years. It was all worth it. Outside the courthouse, the crowd parted for us as we walked down the steps. Reporters hovered, but I didn't care about their questions. I didn't care about the cameras. All I cared about was the man beside me, my son, and the little girl holding my hand, her innocent eyes full of wonder and relief. Michael was walking a little straighter now, his crutches not quite as heavy as they had been. It was like something inside him had shifted, just as it had inside me. The world hadn't been kind to us, but we had survived. And now, we were going to rebuild. I glanced down at Sarah as she skipped beside us, her hand tightly gripped in mine. "Grandma, look," she said, pointing to a small flower growing in a crack in the sidewalk. "It's so beautiful." I smiled down at her, my heart aching in the best way possible. "Yes, sweetheart, it is." It wasn't just the flower. It was everything. Everything we had fought for. Everything we had almost lost. We walked away from that courthouse with our heads high, not as victims, but as survivors. As a family. The days that followed were quieter, but no less intense. Michael and I spent hours talking about what had happened, about the future. We talked about rebuilding the house, making it a home again, a place where laughter could fill the rooms instead of the silence that had haunted it for so long. Rebecca was gone. There were rumors that she had fled, disappeared after the trial, but I didn't care. She had already taken so much from us, but now, she would take nothing more. She was no longer a part of our lives. I turned my focus entirely on Michael and Sarah. I knew that we would be okay, not because the world had suddenly become fair, but because we had each other. And for the first time in years, I truly believed that love, when it was built on truth and trust, could overcome anything. But there was one last thing I needed to do. I had one final conversation to have, and this time, it wouldn't be with Rebecca. It would be with someone much more important. I took a deep breath as I dialed Thomas's number. He had stayed quiet throughout this entire ordeal, barely speaking a word after the trial. I didn't know what he was feeling, but I knew I had to reach out. I had to know if we could heal the rift between us. "Hello, Mom," he answered, his voice soft and unsure. "Thomas," I said, trying to steady my voice, "I know things have been hard, but we can fix this. We're family." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing, and for the first time in a long while, I heard the sound of a man, my son, trying to find his way back home. "I want to come by," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I need to make things right." And just like that, the last piece of the puzzle was falling into place. The family I thought I had lost, Michael, Sarah, Thomas, was finding its way back together. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was real. And sometimes, that's all you need to build something worth fighting for. The truth had set us free, but it also left us with something we hadn't expected. A new beginning. One where we could rebuild, not just our lives, but our trust in each other. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. But it was worth it. As I sat down to write a letter to Richard, telling him about all that had happened, I finally felt at peace. The storm had passed, and in its wake, I had found a new strength. Not just as a mother, but as a woman who had fought for her family, and won. "We are stronger than we think," I wrote. "And together, we can weather anything."